have very I have a very short presentation. If we are, no, that's not the first slide. If we could go back to the first slide. So basically, I'll try to connect the previous presentations and talk a little bit about the way how history and public art can come together and what are the main challenges for both artists and historians when we cooperate. So basically, with Bureau Nova, we had some experience of joint discussions and doing things in stone, or let us say in a physical form. And our main challenge was to identify the main sources of inspiration. Where do we get information about things that can be talked about, that can be taken as examples or as the bricks for the new art objects? Because, well, in the two previous presentations, we had very different modalities, I think. In the first presentation, there was more of this nostalgia, that the old better days, right, and we are losing it, and there was something of value in there that could be maybe preserved for the future. While in the second presentation, we were more like, all right, let's do something for the future without really looking at the historical models, right? And I see there a bit of a rupture, and it is actually, in short, the kind of challenge that we all face when we do this work. Public art and history and identity and politics and philosophy, right? And in Almatyevsk, in the Republic of Tatarstan, we tried to, in my case, to engage with the rich legacy of local Islamic culture, mainly represented in manuscripts. So there are lots of private and official holdings of Islamic books, which are often are being misconceptualized in national terms as only the national identity of this region. And these sources are often overlooked as well because they are written in Arabic, Persian, a variety of Turkic languages, and often are inaccessible to not only specialists from outside, say artists and urban planners, but also for the local population because they simply don't speak these languages anymore. And these are sources and texts from before. And this situation actually makes the challenge even more difficult because if you want to create something new, then any attempt of engaging with the past has a danger of being accused in sort of exoticizing the local culture, because what is authentic? This kind of stuff that is not recognized anymore, that nobody can have a direct access to it, or something that comes from the more accessible, recognizable forms, but more industrialized, more modern, and more recent, right? So this is kind of the question that is always on the table. Do we get things real? Then this is what is in there. But very few people on the ground can easily associate themselves with this, which means that probably we've got to do more of educational work and explanation and more of like, not fantasies, but questions of how to build future on the basis or with attempts of engagement with this kind of models from the past. All right. So, yeah, and the main question for me as a historian was how to speak of Tatar Muslim history in public spaces. So just very briefly, Tatars is a nation that played an important role in Muslim history of Central Eurasia for many centuries. And those of you who know of the Golden Horde, that's probably, and the Mongol states, that's kind of the cultural reference that you can keep in mind while me speaking. And as I said already, the Tatars had very prominent Muslim heritage, which was global and open for various transnational connectivities in Central Asia, in the Middle East, in Persianate cultural sphere. So it's not like you can say, oh, this is easily recognizable Islamic culture, and we all know all about that. It's not. It doesn't work like this. History is also is not homogeneous. There are so many multiple tracts and multiple interpretations of what Islam is, and there are so many languages of it that we as historians and artists can play with to create new objects and new ideas. Right. So. And today, in present-day Republic of Tatarstan and elsewhere, as in many other places in the world, Dubai included, there are multiple attempts of rediscovering the local identity and doing something with the past to define for themselves what it does mean to be a Muslim or what does it mean to be a Tatar today. And as this young lady kind of also attempts to do, playing with the new media and some symbols, very simple symbols of local identity. What is problematic about that, we'll talk in short. But basically, for me, these colonial forms of representation is the main problem. What would I mean by that? Basically, with this picture in mind, we can see the ornaments being kind of the main vehicle and the main instruments of self-expression. What is the national culture, or what is it, or how do you express the local identity? You just pick up a few recognizable symbols, and then you say, hey, this is how we do it. And every time when there is an architectural competition, or there is a question, oh, let's build another art object, and some officials or managers and even artists, they ask, so how to express the national identity, how to express the local identity? This is what we do. We add some ornaments here and there and say, hey, this is Tatar, Uzbek, Kyrgyz, or whatever, or Arab. This is how it works, unfortunately, in many, many cases all over the globe. It's very simple, often meaningless, lazy engagement with or understanding even of cultural diversity. This methodology, this colonial objectification of cultures in the world, has its own tradition in Western practices of colonialism. And this is, for example, one of the photographs from the Soviet times that depicts Muslims praying. Well, I find everything problematic about this picture, and for me, it's a symbol of framing and speaking about Islam, not in terms of individuals who have their own voice, but just a mass of people who are praying there and who are not even people. These are just objects that are there available for an observer to frame, to describe, to speak about, to represent, and to say what they are, basically. And nobody cares about their own opinion or the narratives that they might have, which is quite telling, because so far we have almost very, very superficial understanding of Islam and of the history of Islam in the Soviet Union, for example. So we have these pictures, so we have representations, we have the voices about, but we have very few testimonies of these people who are actually being depicted on these photographs. And for me, this is a metaphor of what's going on also in the field of art and architecture, when we're trying to say anything about Islam, Islamic art, or national identities, not only in the Middle East, but also elsewhere in Central Asia, in other places of the world. And well, this is what I said, never enough of ornament. And ornament kind of becomes this lazy instrument of, of playing this national card. And, once you have it there, then you're done. You can do anything what you want with this space that is given for you, for the Western artists to, shape the object that is the Orient. Folklorization, that is, well, speaking about these local identities that they have very special, very exotic languages for their own that are in need of preservation and representation somewhere at conferences where gentlemen speak in English about these cultures and make them understandable and easily accessible for the international audience. And actually, once we realize that when speaking about other cultures, we actually get what these cultures are about, then it's a problem, I think. If all cultures in the world are easily accessible and understandable, and we sort of can relate ourselves with these symbols, then it means that, well, actually they are trying to speak your language. They're trying to imitate you. And is this really what art is about? Is it really what history as a scholarship wants to achieve? I doubt so. So narratives in translation, that is also another challenge and another problem that we had to deal with in our projects, and I think it's a problem that is global. That we often seek to again find stories of the localities that that we can associate ourselves with, and we can easily sort of access without even learning the language or trying to understand what these cultures are really about. So that also results in self-denial of the people who had been practicing these cultures. They think, well, actually, the way how I do it is not sellable. It is nothing that can be of interest to anyone in the world. I'll try to imitate the style of Western education, Western academy, Western modes of art and fashion. And that also kind of creates the circle that on the one hand you have the objectification from outside, but also from inside of these cultures. They would say, well, we don't want to live in these houses anymore. We would like to have these modern buildings. And they would deny themselves their culture, their language, their ways of being. And then we get the rupture from which we sort of started this picture, right? It's in the end, these objects, these layers of culture, they become inaccessible not only for foreign observers, but also for themselves as well, right? Linguistically or culturally, they would say, wow, this is all about religion, right? We will not bring it, we don't take it seriously because for religion we have other spaces. But Islam is not religion, right? Islam is a way of life, and it's about philosophy, it's about everything. You can use it in many different ways if you are sort of into this epistemology in a way, and you take it seriously. And the last thing that is also widespread is the national frame that really makes things difficult to work with. And the world that we live in is now highly divided into these national borders, which often make little sense in terms of linguistic delimitation, cultural delimitation, and also in terms of these ornaments, for example. Often in Central Asia or elsewhere, it's really difficult to say, oh, this or that ornament is specific to this or that nation. right? And the same thing would be for other cultural phenomena as well. So for me, the national language, the national methodology doesn't really make sense, right? And I think this is something that is common for art as well. So is there a way out? Is there a kind of methodology, a path, or a certain take that would lead us away from objectification and from devaluing the cultures that are out there? And is there a way out to arrive at the more complex understanding of what these historical cultures are and how they can be given a new life, not just in terms of preservation as historical remnants or remnants of the past that can be cherished, of course, but this is, you put it as objects in the museum and that's it. I think what is great about the union of artists and scholars is that we can try to give life to cultural alternatives, something that had been going on for centuries and then under the pressure of modernity and industrialization sort of became marginalized, became objectified and became just lifeless objects in the museums or private collections. So basically this is what we tried to do. We tried to take out these objects from the museums and from old books and to put them on the walls of the city. This was one example that we did back in 2018 together with the Bureau Nova, and this mural is based on the coinage from the Golden Horde, 13th and the 14th century, with the saying that was used there. In Turkic, it sounds "Kutlu bulsun," so be happy. This is kind of the loose translation that we sort of conveyed there. And what is interesting about this particular case, so this is coinage, right? State, symbol, economy, stuff. Sort of you think, how can this possibly be part of the present day culture? But in fact, this saying, "Kutlu bulsun," be happy, is still part of the language. So in Tatar language, they still use the same expression, but it has altered its meaning. So today they say, be happy, "Kutlu bulsun," when they celebrate something. You buy a new t-shirt and people say, "Kutlu bulsun." So let it bring you happiness. So even though the language has secularized and nationalized over the past years and over the last century, we can bring some elements from the past and put them on the wall to let people know that your own language and your own culture has more options out there, more variations and more physical, material aspects to it that you can think about. You can Google it, you can explore it, you can even think about the additional layers of meaning production in the everyday things that you are using. You buy this card for your friends in the shop, but then when you walk past this mural, you can also get a sense that it's more, these words and these everyday objects, they have more meaning to it than we sort of see on the surface. And I think, for me, this mural is really a success in the sense of, decolonial work, I think, because it is not only sort of points at certain layers of culture that are not easily identifiable in the everyday life, but these mural also helps to broaden the cultural repertoire that people out there in this particular locality are dealing with on the daily basis, right? And the hope is that more will come after that, so that, say, anyone basically who is confronted with these mural can criticize it or can take this methodology as a point of departure for new cultural production. So another case that we also did back then was sort of evolving around the question how to talk about Muslim scholarship on the streets, sort of away from the stereotypical understanding of Islam being represented only in the mosques, and Islam being religion, and Islam being a very strictly defined field that you have to be really careful about not to misinterpret it, otherwise you are in trouble in all possible way. And this is what we did. So we used the imaginary and the portraits of a local alim, a religious scholar from the first half of the 20th century, who was an author of multiple writings on secular and religious subjects, who was a historian, a journalist, prominent also among the intellectuals in the Middle East, and someone who would probably not be a superstar among the people who sort of today are walking around here, right? But since the guy was born in the vicinity of the city, we also sort of tried to bring his image right in the center, in the city landscape, to remind, on the one hand, of this part of history, but also to bring together many cultural aspects specific to this region, and to say that the Tatar culture is not reducible to the colonial objectification and is not reducible to 1, 2, 3 kind of simple folkloristic symbols that were attached to it in the course of the 1930s and 1940s. So basically we used a few photographs. Of course, they might also be kind of seen problematic because this is, you can analyze the visionary, the tradition of producing these photos in the imperial times, but we also sort of put in this mural some elements from the material world of the Islamic culture in the region as well. Well, if we sort of compare the two, the Kutlubolsun mural with the coins and the second one with Rizadin Fakhreddin, sort of his face and an image taken together from multiple elements, I would say the first one is more of a success to my taste, simply because it gives you more of a freedom of interpretation and digging, that you can dig into something that is easily that you have a starting point of reference. You have a saying that is alive today, this be happy saying, while with this mural with Rizadin Fakhreddin, it is more obscure in a way, and one has to get more information, one has to be educated about this person, and it's more of a dictate on the part of artists and scholars that we sort of introduce this person to a broader audience. What can be problematic about the projects that we did? So on the one hand, we try to solve certain issues, or try to find new ways of speaking about the Tatar culture. But what was also problematic and still remains problematic about our art program, I think, is this question: are we laying claim to authenticity? Are we saying that, you know, this modern industrialized culture is not authentic, and one has to go deeper, and one has to go sort of to search for manuscripts to dig out the true culture? In fact, it is, well, at least the intention was not like that. What I think is the main task is to broaden the spectrum, to give the communities more access to multiple variations of what culture can be, and to provide access to certain objects, ideas, languages, symbols that are not easily accessible to everyone. So basically, at this point, I think we can go back to the very first slide again, so that the main problem for many, not only for the Tatars, but also for many communities in the world, is this access to their own cultures and to their own varieties of self-fashioning and self-description. And the wider this spectrum, the easier this accessibility to the past, the better, I think, the more interesting combinations of futuristic scenarios we can get. And I believe, I mean, this is what a historian has to say, but I believe in the value of history, not just as an object somewhere in the gallery or in the museum, but something that can still play a role in present-day society. Thank you, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
Thank you so much. That was an exciting and very intense, again, speech. Questions, comments, thoughts?
Sure. Maybe it's an observation. Thank you for the presentation, which is some great, the approach of how to interpret history, especially within the religious boundaries and so on. I think what I found really interesting, the visual representation of these public art installations, like the murals, which they introduce techniques, or they use techniques of deconstruction, abstraction, and layering. So it's never kind of one object, like the early selfie simplification image you had. But and I don't know how much the kind of the aesthetic, like this is it's not a deconstruction, but it's superimposition to a point where there's a meaning between the background and the foreground. And the foreground, it's a script, obviously, but it's 3D. So depending which way you look at it. And also the other one with the, maybe if we can go to the other one. This one here, it's an absolute deconstruction. My generations would call this deconstructions and decomposition and layering, where there's not a single focus or a single object or a series of objects. But again, there's a space in between, which I would imagine this ambiguous space of interpretation, the non-figurative, might be one way to address the challenge of literal representation. I mean, I'm just making an observation, but also in the form of a question.
Yeah, thank you for this comment. I think this is really what the artist also wanted to achieve. That indeed there is some error between the cultural elements that we sort of make references to and a variety of conceptualizations that are open for interpretation for anyone, basically, who is passing by. What needs to be done, I think, and what we also try to achieve, is that mural is not the only genre that can exist there. There should be more activities, more cultural forms associated with this, and maybe, yeah, some discussions that would connect, deconstruct this visionary, and that would also make this part of the everyday life. That's basically the idea, the goal.